you know, I really appreciate your time. I know this is an important topic. As I have worked with you recently, and as a company, as we've worked with you, we know that victim restitution has its importance to you in terms of what expectations you're being held to has increased over the years. And so what we wanted to do is just take a minute to kind of walk through some of the programs and some of the things that we're seeing every day within your organizations and within the industry as a whole that could be of benefit to you, and hopefully share some things that you maybe haven't seen before. Just to get started, you know, it was interesting. I intended to dazzle you here with some statistics and some data that you haven't seen before. And what's really interesting to me as I did some research is that victim restitution is something that isn't widely reported. What happens is that it's so isolated into your various departments, whether that's a county or a court or whatever organization you happen to be part of. Each state does it a little differently. The way that you count, that you record the data associated with victim restitution is different. And so as a result, there's not a lot of national data associated with victim restitution. And as a result, there's not a lot of guidelines that best practices that are available. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to spend a few minutes today just reviewing that. Just in general, things that you are more aware of than I am for sure. There are obviously a number of orders. The numbers of orders that are being issued by judges have increased. Victim restitution is becoming very popular in terms of being associated with convictions. And unfortunately, the rates of collections have decreased, and that's certainly not because you folks aren't trying. It's because the size of the order has increased, and obviously the number of orders. Unfortunately, your resources haven't increased in line with that. And so there are the rates of collections associated with victim restitution is quite low. And then there's an increased pressure to collect more every day, whether that pressure is coming from victims themselves who are calling you and saying, hey, you know, this has been ordered, where's my money? They're supposed to be paying, I know they're working, I know, why aren't they paying? To judges that are asking, court systems that are asking, unfortunately media that's asking. Just in a quick Google search of victim restitution in the news, there's almost every article I read was talking about how little victim restitution is being collected, and how victims are not receiving their just due, and that kind of thing. And obviously that's not the kind of attention that you folks or your board of supervisors or court administrators or whoever's involved are wanting to see. So the pressure is increasing. And this last point here, did I mention it's complicated? You folks know much better than I do that victim restitution it involves a number of different organizations. It involves probation and parole and prison and jail and all the different departments and units that are associated with the crime or with the victim or with the perpetrator, the debtor. All of those organizations are represented and have a hand in improving or causing victim restitution to not be as high as it could be. And so the state of the program, well, it's tough. You're in a hard spot. And so what we wanted to do is just provide some overall ideas, some general ideas, and really we are a software company, so some technologies that we think could help benefit you in that particular department. So to start with, it's all about the tools, right? All of you folks are on this call because you either have revenue results or RPCS. So you're all current clients, and you have one of our two products. Both products have a victim restitution module, and whether you have that particular item or you do it outside of that module, it is something that you folks should be aware of, that we think about on a regular basis. Victim restitution, victim interest, all the areas associated with collecting money for a victim is on the front of our minds, because it's something that you are feeling the pressure on. So it is something that's, those areas, those modules, are certainly things that we think about and talk about and improve and make some general benefits to, or general upgrades to. But what I wanted to talk about today more specifically was the program itself, right? So the software is one thing, and if you have interests or concerns or ideas, you know, we are welcome to hear those, and if we can make those work, and if they work for everybody, we're happy to incorporate those kind of things in our software. But what I want to talk about specifically today is some of the ancillary services that ancillary services that you folks are using every day. The number one way, and this, you know, I'm an old collector. I started off as a collector sitting in the cubicle, and my boss always told me if I wanted to collect more money, then I needed to make more phone calls. And that was the general answer, and unfortunately, it's still the answer, right? We have to increase contact. Some ideas, some things that I've seen recently that I think were pretty innovative, and things that I think you folks could think about if you haven't already. And the first one is the creation of an internal call center. I really think this is a powerful structural change that any organization can make. As I visit and work with clients, most of you folks are working in an environment where your quote-unquote collectors, revenue officers, whoever they are working one case at a time, right? They have a certain number of cases that they're supposed to be working a day, or these are the cases we want you to work, and they are reviewing them and working through them. And then when someone makes a phone call in, they're stopping what they're doing and they're answering the phone. I really think I've spent a lot of time working with child support organizations, and I think that this is where this idea comes from. They have a method, a way of saying, you know what, let's take a small group of people, we're going to call them the call center, and all the incoming calls are going to be answered by a single unit. That unit is trained in a way that they can handle a wide variety of tasks. They can do the simpler items, right? They can take payments, they can give specific information associated with the account, and if they get to something that is more difficult, something that they are maybe not able to or not in a timely way deal with, they can transfer that call to someone else. But what that does is it allows the collectors who are maybe more seasoned, who have a skill set that you want to take advantage of in a different way, the freedom to be focused on different cases and making different outbound calls. The call center also has the ability to function as an outbound call center, meaning you can initiate those calls via dialer or just manually dialing, however you choose to do it, through the call center mechanism, and then have them forward the calls that they need to specialists. And in the child support arena especially, that has allowed the number of contacts and the number of the demands on individual agents' time to be managed more effectively, because there's that kind of division of labor. Sometimes that doesn't work, and I understand that depending on your organization, depending on the team that you're working with, and a lot of times the size of your team, that's not always possible. So if that's not possible, one of the things that I think you folks can think about that would be another way of focusing your efforts in those kind of outbound opportunities is, in the old collection world, we called it prime time, right? So when I started off as a collector, we had a very specific time from 8 to 10 and 3 to 5, where we didn't do anything else but make outbound phone calls. And the idea was during those time periods, they were focused, they were more likely to have individuals at home, right? Those were the, of the working hours, those were the best times to reach consumers. But everyone knew it was part of the culture that during those time periods you made outbound phone calls. And I just think that that idea, that concept could be initiated where there are specific times, whatever works for you and your organization, where individuals know, hey, I'm not going to jump up and make a photocopy of this, or I'm not going to send this letter at this time, or I'm not going to ask someone else about this problem during these time periods. During this time period, the expectation is that I'll be making outbound phone calls. Obviously, technology is a powerful part of increasing your contacts, and I know that in terms of compliance and some other issues that there are a lot of questions. I do think I wanted to point out that a dialer isn't just a dialer, right? In the old days, that might have been the case, that a dialer kind of had one task and one mode, one functionality, and that's just not true anymore. Most dialers today have, they may call them different things than the 4 that are listed here, but there are 4 different modes. The preview mode is where an agent, an account is pulled up in front of them. They have all the time in the world to review it, make sure they know what they want to say, and hit the button and can go forward, and it dials. A power dialer is where a line, as your line opens up, then outbound calls are made, so that you're never putting someone on hold or whatever. So as your agent becomes available, then the dialer attempts to contact someone else, but while they're on the phone, it's not dialing additional people. A predictive dialer is, it tries to guess, right? It has an algorithm that tries to understand how long are calls normally, and it tries to predict. It's much more efficient. There's very little downtime associated with it. There are some times where folks will be contacted and then have to be placed on hold because there's no available agent. But that's one of the things that any dialing company or any technology company can help you kind of dial it in correctly, to use the expression there. And then a message blast, which is just an opportunity to leave a message, right? They can either link back into your system, or they just simply receive a message that says to call back. You have an issue that you need to deal with. The reason I kind of wanted to review those different modes of communication of the dialer is that some organizations look at that dialer and just say, no, we tried that, we don't do that anymore, or that doesn't work, or we can't use that. And I really see that in all the counties and courts and cities and states that we work with, it's really interesting to see how many different ways that dialer can be utilized. And so it's something that you've written off a long time ago, then maybe it's worth another thought. If it's something that you're using, and maybe you're using it just one of these 4 ways, there may be some other opportunities for you to take advantage of to take fully of that technology that's available. And then lastly, just monitored behavior always increases results, right? There's lots of research and studies that say when someone knows that you are monitoring their behavior and that you're tracking it, the thing that you're tracking will increase, period. You don't have to do anything else but to let them know that you're monitoring it. And so just the idea of keeping track of how many cases or how many, some very specific or simple KPIs, key performance indicators that you can record and track, you will find just by tracking them, those numbers will increase. And so if you want to increase contacts, it's really a good, powerful way to start. It's just to make sure that you know how many contacts they're making, and if you can, if that is permissible, obviously the power comes with sharing with them how many they're making every day. And then just in general, watch your costs, right? Increasing contacts has the, if you use technology, there is an opportunity for you to increase your costs, and so it is something that you should be wary of. And just as an example, the screenshot you're looking at is Ultimate Contacts, and this is our RevQ's hosted dialing solution. And this is just a dashboard screen associated with that. But one of the other things that really has changed in the last 10 or 15 years is obviously cloud systems. You know, in the old days when you bought a dialer, it was a big investment. There was a piece of hardware that sat somewhere in a server and did that thing. And that's just not true anymore, right? The overhead is extremely low. There is, you know, some setup fees, but almost nothing. There's no hardware management. There's no, your IT doesn't necessarily have to, that's not one more server for IT to watch and maintain. And one of the things that I think it's true for Ultimate Contacts, but it's true for any dialer, is the ability to scale. In the old days, you would purchase a dialer and it was a one-time cost, and boy, you wanted to use it like crazy because you paid a lot for it. Ultimate Contacts and other hosted dialers give you the ability to, if I want to increase my effort, then yes, the cost is connected to that increase in effort, but you know, if I want to do that over a short period of time, I want to do that during tax intercept season. So I have 3 or 4 months where I'm going to ramp it up, and then I know that, hey, I'm going to decrease my cost, or I'm going to decrease the effort. Well, the costs are associated with that. So the ability to scale is something that is really extremely powerful in cloud-based dialing systems. And just that it's easy. Boy, it really is. Obviously there's a lot of setup. There's a lot of options, but not in relation to the way it used to be, the way that I used to manage a dialer back in the day. It's a lot easier than it used to be. Is there a question?
Hi, Brent. There is a question that came in it's fairly specific, but I'll give you the opportunity to address it if you'd like here.
Sure.
If an inmate has to pay victim restitution and is paying while in jail and then is released to probation, how do you transition the collection process between jail and probation? And then what if the person is caught and goes back to jail?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And in my research and my understanding, you know, victim restitution is something that is collected throughout, right? So not in all states or counties is this allowed, but for example, in the scenario that you provided, you have a debtor who is say in jail. So they have a canteen account where the money that they're earning while they're working, money that is being placed in there by family members and that kind of thing, is in some cases you can attach that for victim restitution. So that's one kind of scenario. The other, so then now the scenario is that that person is out of jail and back out, and then you have to transition them. And then potentially they go back, right? That's a pattern that unfortunately is repeated often. And so to answer that specifically, I would just say it's something that we could certainly work with you in terms of your specific system and how it's monitored in terms of desks or flags or bins or however it is. But I would just say that you need to build in the structure of your collections effort, you need to have specific, this person is in, we need to know the status of where they're at, right, and how they're paying and why they're paying or why they're not paying. And so we can build that within either of the platforms that we have, just in terms of there's a lot of different ways. I'm making the face here. There's a lot of different ways of managing that individual, but it's certainly something that we can talk through, and Greg we have whoever asked that question, so I'm happy to follow up with you directly and kind of go over in detail what you're looking for. The next slide here is really about barriers. Someone said something to me a long time ago that it's just perfect sense. If they owe money, right? If this person owes you money, it's because they're not paying it. There's some barrier to preventing that person from paying their bill. And that barrier probably has nothing to do with you, right? They're unemployed, they just don't want to, they're trying to avoid paying that victim restitution or their balances in general. There's a reason they're not paying. What we have to be very careful about is that we can't become another barrier. They already have one. We already have some work to do to overcome that barrier. And so it's important for us to make sure that we are not that another barrier. And this slide is really about making sure that people can pay in a way that is convenient to them. And it's just as simple as if someone calls you and says, yeah, I guess I'll pay, and then they say, okay, I got a credit card, and you say, oh, I can't take a payment over the phone. You have increased the likelihood that that individual is not going to pay because there's some additional level of effort that they have to go through, right? They get off the phone and go, well, never mind, I'm not going to do that, right? The pressure of you being on the phone is maybe what pushed them over the edge. So just making it easy for them is important, right? Phone payments, and obviously this depends on your specific environment. Some of you can't take phone payments. Some of you, there's restrictions, and I get that, and obviously we have to live with those restrictions. But if we can implement as many as possible, I think it's powerful. Phone payments is one. An online portal, those are things that are pretty standard across the industry now. Kiosks, I think kiosks are a powerful way of making sure that folks who can come in, maybe not during your payment window hours and can make a payment, and those technologies are out there, and they're pretty impressive. I know that we have an interface with several of them out there so payments are processed automatically. It's a pretty powerful thing. The automated phone payments through your IVR is another way where individuals can just call in. They're just going to make a payment, and so they can go through the computer to do that through the quote-unquote computer. I think that's just another way if they may not want to talk to you. Being able to manage payments from the court or whatever department directly is something that we should all be aware of. And finally, something I want to spend just a minute talking about, maybe something that you haven't seen or thought of, is a specialized web portal. They're often called a negotiator. It's something that we have a negotiator solution, but there are obviously other solutions available to you. And so I'm going to show you some images just of ours, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But I think this is something that you folks should be considering. The statistic there in the corner, I think, is something worth talking about. Consumers prefer to pay online 26-to-1 versus talking to an agent. 26-to-1, and I just think that number will increase over time, right? You folks tend to deal with youthful individuals. The average age of your quote-unquote debtor is, I would say, lower than consumer debt. And so that statistic becomes even more, it just becomes something that you have to keep in mind all the time. So what you're looking at here is our ultimate negotiator, and it's white labeled, so it looks like it's part of your website. But individuals can log in, they can see their balances, and instead of, so a traditional portal would say, okay, you have a balance of, in this case, looks like $9,360. They can either pay or not pay, and maybe they can, make a partial payment. A negotiator, what it does is allows you to create business rules that define how an individual is going to pay. So in this scenario, in this screen, there's some options. Now those options may increase or decrease depending on the type of account, the type of balance that someone is dealing with, right? So they can pay in now, they can pay in 2 payments, they can pay in 3, they can make a payment, right? And what it does is it allows them to say, it'll ask, how much do you want to pay? And maybe they put in $100. And then according to the business rules you set up, the system will say, no, I'm sorry, $100 isn't enough. You need to pay or choose another one. And so then they say, okay, well, they want $150. I'm sorry, $150 isn't enough. And eventually it's going to provide to them some options. But it allows the offender, the consumer, to be able to have a little bit of control, which goes a long way into being able to make them feel invested in the system. So they picked the amount. They didn't have to deal with a quote-unquote collector. They didn't have to call the court. They could do it all online. They could do it on their phone or whatever, right? They have the option of paying in a different way, but you still get to be able, the advantage of putting in the rules, right? So the rules are things like, maybe we don't allow a negotiator at all on certain types of cases, or maybe we allow a settlement in certain cases. There's minimum payments, or there's a percentage. We apply a fee or don't apply a fee. There's literally hundreds of rules that you can set up that allow you to control how the negotiator works. And we've seen it work very powerfully in third party, and we're starting to see a lot of real interest in public sector and governments too. And I think that it's just another way of communicating, another way of removing that barrier, and I think it has some powerful application, especially in terms of victim restitution, right? We all know that victim restitution, depending on your case or your state or county or whatever, either has to be paid first, or they have to pay victim restitution before they can get off probation or parole or whatever, right? So there's all these things. Well, this gives you that opportunity to set some guidelines and restrict those payments so that you're getting online payments in a way that makes sense for that particular case type. The next area that I want to talk about is data, right? So if you want to increase victim restitution, then you have to increase the number of people you talk to. And in that situation, not only do you have to call more people, but you also have to find the phone number for more people, or the address, or whatever. And data is an interesting area. It's an interesting issue, right? You have data that no other collection agency, hospital, or bank has access to, right? Some of you have DMV, some of you have state employment information, right? There's all kinds of data that you have, but there are advantages to consumer data too. And whatever the data source is, it's important that you are that it's integrated, that you're using all of it in a smart way, right? So that's the dumping versus using data. Sometimes we get data and we say, yep, that's a phone number, and we just stick it in the system. When you get a phone number, when you go out to any data company and say, hey, I want phone numbers, and you bring those back, you should be thinking in terms of not only which accounts do I want to get data on, right? It can't just be all of them. There's got to be a selection criteria. So thinking through that process, but also thinking through what kind of process you're going to use in order to take advantage of that data, right? There's more than one source. I really think that's a powerful thing. Like I said, you folks have great data, official data, but there's a lot of data that is provided at the consumer level that that debtors may not be willing to, they're not going to share, or they don't want to give specific information, but hey, if it's the magazine that they get, they may be willing to allow that, or put their real address or whatever. Make sure the timing is right. Make sure that you are getting data at the appropriate time, that it's, maybe it's right at the beginning, maybe it's a month in, maybe it's 6 months in, but however it is for you, it should be thoughtful. You should be deciding when that happens, not just, hey, I get a phone number and an address search on every one of my accounts. No, when does it happen? And really being specific about when that happens. Focus your spend on the accounts that you really want to collect. I really think, and I know that there's some trickiness here, that some things that have to be considered as well, but taking your limited funds and making sure that you're applying it to those accounts that make the most sense. Maybe you're doing victim restitution campaigns, and so you're picking specific accounts with specific balances that are victim restitution or whatever it is, but you're spending that money wisely. And then the last one is, we've kind of talked about, but you have gas, how's the car? That's really what data is, right? It's the fuel that keeps things going. It allows the collection process to continue. But you have to have in place a process, whether that's individuals or whether that's technology, or in my opinion, the best is a combination of both, that have the ability to take advantage of that data. Data sources, there's millions of, this happens to be associated with our Ultimate Analytics product, one of our data options, but honestly, we all know this. Our data is everywhere, right? Our address and phone number are everywhere. So it's not a question of, does that data exist? It's, is it recent enough, and are you doing the right things with it? That data comes from all kinds of different things: address, phone, demographic, bankruptcy, deceased. Bankruptcy and deceased kind of brings up an interesting topic. Obviously, bankruptcy doesn't necessarily apply to victim restitution, but finding out if an individual is deceased or if they are no longer able to pay is a way of isolating those accounts and saying, look, we're not going to put any more effort into that. That's a dead end. We're not going to worry about that. And then one other item that isn't on the slide itself, but I think is important, is Social Security numbers. You know, we have worked with a number of states and counties with appending a Social Security number. CVS, or Consumer Verification Services, is the product, but it gives you, and like I said, whatever product you're using, but applying that Social Security number at the right time is a really powerful way to collect. We've done some projects with clients that have collected more during their tax intercept season in 1 year than they had in the 3 years previous, right? In one 3-month period, thousands of dollars, millions of dollars really came in on those intercepts for no other reason than we took accounts that didn't have a Social Security number, and in a very simple, accurate way applied a Social Security number to that person, making them eligible for whatever intercept program you happen to be using, and the results were really phenomenal. So really looking at the data is more than, do I have an address and phone number? Those are great and those are helpful, but looking at data from other sources is also important. And then looking at those results. This is data that we've worked with, and just thinking, okay, yeah, we returned an address, but is it a business address? Is it a P.O. box? Is that a prison address? Should we, you know, if the consumer is listing their address as federal prison or the local jail, that's something that we should be thinking about, right? Is it a fraudulent address? Is it a hotel or a temporary address? All of those things are items that are important, and that you should be interrogating the data that you're getting back, and again, creating campaigns and changing your effort based on the results. Sorry, there we go. And again, this is just another slide that kind of identifies different ways of looking at that data and connecting it to individuals and doing something differently with it. Lastly, at least in terms of data, victim data is something that I think is an option. It's something that, as I've talked to you folks, some of you are doing some some limited projects with getting victims' addresses and phone numbers. Obviously, collecting victim restitution is important. Paying it out, being able to find the victim is very important. And I know that you folks hold millions of dollars in trust for victims who you can't find. And so we do have some applications and some ways that we can help you apply some addresses and phone numbers to victims themselves and be proactive and really try to find those victims and do our part to make them whole. The last area, the last category that I want to talk about is just in terms of building a victim restitution structure, right, within your collections environment, right? You collect on a lot of different things, whether fines or fees or other types of debt, right? Not just court debt necessarily, but defining exactly how a victim accounts are worked with and dealt with every day. And part of that is the process, part of that is the structure, like the structure of the department itself, and part of it is people. Early intervention. The very first thing, and this data on the right here is real. It's not necessarily victim data or victim specific, but it is public sector. And I think it's really important to understand that if you are going to collect money for on any account, your best chance of doing that is really in the first few months, right? In most cases, in a third-party consumer debt world, we are telling collectors that they have about 6 to 9 months, depending on the debt type and that kind of thing, to get what they need to get. And after that, the percentages of collections decrease exponentially over time. You have a few months, really, to get folks on the right track, right? Set expectation, make them familiar with the process, get them invested in the process, establish a relationship with them. They need to know that, hey, you're not the bad guy, you're willing to help, and that comes from working with them early. And this last thing I think is really important. They need to see themselves as payers. They need to think of themselves as someone who pays a bill, who pays this account, right? They have friends, they have associates that have been in the same situation, family members sometimes that have been in this exact same situation. They have cases with you as well. They have balances. They may even have victim balances. And it's important for us to establish with all offenders, but especially younger folks, that the expectation is set and that they see themselves differently. And part of that is training with your collectors, but part of it is structure too, and finding ways to communicate really early in the process, and not just a letter, right? They need to feel a greater connection to you in some way. Specialization. You know, I'm always interested in the crimes, and that's why I picked this particular picture. But I think it's interesting that, you know, there's so many different police organizations, right? Just in this picture, there's 3 that you can see, and they focus on specific types of crime, right? Why do they do that? Because they have expertise and they have tools available. And my proposal to you is that victim restitution be thought of in the same way, right? Cases that have victim restitution should have some sort of specialization. In other words, not everybody collects these, right? Whether it's specific individuals that have specific training, the knowledge, they understand the program, they understand the purpose. They feel invested in the program, right? They're going to be your best advocates. Those collectors are going to be your best method of connecting and working with those individuals. Why? Because they're invested themselves, right? So to be able to identify a team that focuses on those accounts, I think is a really powerful way of increasing that. I also think that, and again, depending on size or organization, you may not have the opportunity of saying, hey, you are just going to work victim accounts. But again, if you can at least say time periods, whether it's hey, an hour a day, this is, you know, or 2 hours a day, we're going to focus on accounts that have victim restitution. Every day we're going to work on those. Or we're going to create a campaign, and this year we're going to have a goal to collect X amount of dollars in victim restitution for the people of our area. And make it real, and you have to have fun with it, right? It's an important, serious thing, but they want to have fun too, right? As an agent, they want to, you know, have a contest or whatever, and then really brag about your results. I really think this is something that I see some in the third party. I don't see it as often as I think is important in the public sector, and that's, boy, if you do something really well and your collectors know that they do something really well, there's a lot of buy-in. New folks come in and they say, hey, we're really good at victim restitution. We're really good at X, Y, or Z. That culture gets passed along, and it gets passed along because you're bragging about your collectors, your agents. You're saying, boy, we're really good at this, and you're saying it publicly and you're saying it privately, but you're saying it often. And then the last one is obviously just monitor the results. You really have to know if these focus times or focused individuals, whether it's working. And we can help you set up those kind of reporting options and help you design the campaign in the system in such a way that you can record that data. But it is important that you understand how well you're doing, because if you don't understand how well these campaigns are working, then you will never be able to repeat them. But if you are successful and do well, and hey, this 1 month campaign to collect $1 million in victim restitution worked really well. We did collect $1 million. We did it with this amount of effort. When you go to do that again sometime in the future, you can look back and say, hey, we wanted to do this and we actually did it. Here are the results. And you won't know that unless you're really monitoring that behavior throughout. And then, you know, real briefly, training. I think that as you review training and as you look at your staff, I think it's important to understand that victim restitution is something that is different, and it has to be thought of a little bit differently. There is one. Is there a question?
There is a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you bet. Let's answer that.
Can we try to find a victim with just a name and an address, or one with a few more identifiers? Yeah, absolutely. In terms of locate data, now the quality of the return diminishes a little bit if you have just the name and the address, but absolutely we can. There are ways of connecting. That's what the Social Security append process does, for example, is looks at just a name and an address and a few other items and appends the social, but we can do that with addresses and phone numbers and that kind of thing too. So absolutely, whatever information you start with, we can work with you and data providers to get a return on. The example that I wanted to talk about just in terms of training is this. They did a research study that I think is important for us to think about when we do our training. You know, in the past, training has meant that we work with our employees in a way that says, look, here's the rules, here's the policies, here's the procedures, be nice on the phone, collect some money, right? I think this example demonstrates really how training has changed and ways that we can kind of move forward. They did an experiment where they went, you know, they had a restaurant and the waiter provided excellent service, right? And they looked at the tip and they considered that tip the baseline, right? So they did it over a number of weeks and months, and this particular waiter delivered similar service to all of his tables, and they looked at the tipping and the variances and really understood what the baseline was. And then they kind of changed it up. And they had the same way, same things, but this time that waiter delivered a mint. And in fact, they didn't even deliver the good mints. It wasn't even the chocolate ones, right? It wasn't that good Andes mint. It was a Starlight mint, right? Just the hard candies. And what the waiter would do is when he delivered the check,
they would put the Starlight mints on there and say, hey, thank you, and they would, walk away. That was it. What they found is just that mint, just putting the mint on the table actually increased tips 3.3%. Right? So the tipping that individual, not necessarily the individual tips went up 3.3%, but the overall tipping was increased by 3% just by giving them something. And obviously we can't give, the folks we're talking to a mint, hey, thanks for coming in, here, pay your bill, now here's a mint. We can't do that necessarily, but this next step is really where the power comes in. They had the waiter or waitress they kind of gave them a script, and what they would do is they would go to the table and they would deliver the check, and they would have a mint for every person at the table. And then the waiter would walk away and stop, turn back to the table and say, you know what, you guys have been a great table. I've really appreciated serving you today. And then they would just drop a handful of mints on the table. Right? Now there was more than one per person, and it was, hey, I just reached in my pocket and gave you a whole handful of mints. And the tipping actually went up 20% just by doing that one little item, right? Just by providing, it wasn't the mint itself, it was that connection. It was being able to deliver that level of service and showing people that you're invested in them, increased results by a lot. And as you think about how do I apply that? How do I apply that kind of research to my training? There's a lot of ways, right? And we won't go through all of these. You'll receive the slides, and you can kind of take a look at these. But, identify and eliminate stalls. We know that. Find your moment of power. Something I refer to, at least, a moment of power is understanding what the individual you're talking to, what they really want. What it is that they need, what's their motivations, and figuring that out and using that. Using persuasion, not coercion. As you think about training, there are ways and methods to train that are more than just here's how to use the system, here's the policy, here's the procedure. It's teaching those persuasion, negotiation, working with individuals in mirroring their different communication styles, all of which are extremely powerful things that I've done and worked with many organizations with hundreds of collectors. I've worked with and helped them to see, kind of look at their training programs, and I think it's something that there's a lot of potential for growth in terms of what your employees can and are willing to do. So just as you look at these kind of training, as you look at these different models, as you look at data and technology, the last thing I would leave you with is that you should be talking to each other. That whether that's at a show or on the phone or just visiting someone else's office, I really think, and as I look through, what was really interesting, a couple of our clients, as I did the research for kind of innovative victim restitution models, several of our clients showed up, right, in the news, in the searches I was doing. And I think that goes to show that you folks are really working hard to make this new and different and right. And there's some great resources internally that you can turn to that are part of other departments, for example, within the courts or the counties that you work with, but also just other people that are on this call or in the shows, or and things that I am happy to kind of facilitate. And if you say, hey, you work with such and such, and is there someone I can talk to at that organization? I'm happy to make those connections, because I think really what's going to change and make your system better is for you folks to be working more closely with each other. And so I hope this webinar was an opportunity for you to kind of get your mind going on maybe some new ideas, and really to open you up to the idea that there's some other models, some other ways of doing things, and maybe we can work together to find those that fit your specific needs. just in terms of closing this out, I very much appreciate your time. I know that all of you are busy, and we asked a few questions. Greg, were there other questions that we can address? We have just a minute or two here.
We do have a question that's fairly specific. Do you have any contacts at the California Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board? I think you could probably address that one offline.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you because there are some things that we can talk about in that regard. So I've got that question. Well, again, I appreciate all your time and your questions, and this has been great. And I will turn the presentation over to Greg, and we'll wrap this up.
All right, thanks, Brett, and thank you for a great presentation today. Thank you all for joining us. We will have a video covering some of the content from today, as well as answers to the specific questions posted online, and an email will go out to you within the next few business days to allow you access to all that. Thanks again, and have a great day.